BMW decided to skip the M versions of the new X5 and the X6 and jump straight into the competition pack, which we have right here. And in this video, I'm gonna redesign the front end because I think there are a couple of things that we can tweak and make it look more classy and more elegant, but still retaining the sportiness of this car. So I'm gonna show you in comparison between the normal X5 in the front, side, and rear, and also the interior. There's something cool about the interior that in the new X5M that kind of makes up for all the other small issues that I have with this design. So let's talk about some of the spec and tech of these two new cars from BMW. There are of course some styling changes on the exterior and also the interior, but there are also a big change to the powertrain here because we still have the same twin turbo 4.4 liter V8, but with some serious modifications done to it. You now have 617 horses and 553 pound-feet of torque. However, you also have an electric motor that is attached to the transmission, the 8-speed auto transmission, and this little motor generates an extra 12 horsepower, but 148 pound-feet of torque. Pretty cool technology. I like when they use electricity and these hybrid systems to kind of make the drive smoother and add some punch in the initial set-off of the cars. Alright, so let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at this new X5. I do like the normal one. I made a video on this. I think it was on my second channel, might have been on this channel, I can't really remember, where I talked about this new design, the facelifted X5. I think it's a nice design. What I did there was to just black out the grill here, for example. I think this grill looks really good, which is pretty rare these days when you talk about new BMWs. This looks great. What I wanted to see in the X5M was the same grille, but maybe with some different lines in here or ribs, but just have the same outline and then just make it black. I think that would have been a great idea to turn it into the X5M competition. But what they did, as you can see, look at this, you have a brand new grille design in the X5M, but this looks like it's been heavily inspired by the XM. However, I think it looks way better in the front end of the X5 than it does in the XM. So it's not really all that bad in the front end of the new X5M. I think it looks good. We still have almost like this traditional E46, E39 M intake in the middle, but it's inverted. Instead of having it going like this, it now is going like this, and then we have the same kind of features on the outside that also resembles those E39, E46, M3, M5 graphics in the lower part. However, when I look at this design, one really weird detail is this graphic feature that goes from zigzag. So you have this angle, and then it goes down to this angle, and then another turn into this angle, and of course this at the bottom here. So you have this zigzag, pretty static looking shape, and I don't know why they decided to make this part underneath the grille black, because it looks really weird. But BMW these days, when it comes to graphics, they're doing some pretty strange things, and this is pretty conservative when you look at what they're doing on other models. And if you just separate these graphic features in the lower part, I think there is too much stuff going on inside here. We have you can see the intercooler in the lower part, then we have some, I don't know what this material is, some plastic piece here, and we have this big chamfer or frame going halfway around. It doesn't cover this part. Same thing in the middle. We have this radar or whatever this sensor is in the middle, taking up a lot of space. Visually, it takes up a lot of space. And you have this cage behind it with the intercoolers on the side, as you can see here. It makes for a pretty messy front end. I do like what they did with the grille here. They just turned the ribs horizontal instead of having them be traditional BMW vertical like we have in the normal X5, which looks pretty good overall. So let's have a look at the side view and let's talk about these wheels, because I think I prefer I think the new X5M wheels, they look great, but I've never been a fan of black wheels because I can't see the design of the spokes inside of these inside of the wheel itself. It just when it's rolling, it just looks like it's an empty space where the wheels are supposed to sit. I do love this design of the normal X5 wheels. I think these are gorgeous. One thing that I really like that they did is, of course, black out the trim pieces that are silver, or I don't think this is chrome, this is like polished aluminum or something like that. and have those pieces be blacked out in the M version, which is as it should be. Same thing with this detail, looks a lot better blacked out right here. This feels like it's just a piece that they added for I'm not sure what reason, but it just looks out of place, and having that be blacked out kind of makes it melt into the background a little bit more. Alright, so let's have a look at the rear view and the interior before we jump into the actual redesign of the front end of this. So the rear view, I think this is probably the best view for the new X5M. I do like what they did in the changes here compared to the more elegant, more luxurious feel of the normal X5, which I think looks really good with these horizontal lines emphasizing the width of the car. These new graphics, I've heard a lot of opinions about them. Some people like them, some people don't really like them, what they did compared to the pre-facelift generation. I think they look good because we have some dynamic flow in it. It goes from thick here into a thin piece, and it looks like it has some movement or some direction in it, almost like an arrow in the rear end. Now, look at what they did in the new X5M down here, and the changes to specifically the lower part. You have this same line that we have in the normal X5, but it now continues and creates a housing for this reflector piece down here, and I think this is actually a more elegant integration of the rear end. And then of course we have the quad tailpipes, which we don't have in the normal X5. We have 4 bazooka tailpipes in the rear, sitting in this pretty subtle black diffuser. It doesn't look too aggressive, or it doesn't take up too much height either. It just feels like a natural fit for the X5M. One detail that I think they did on the new X5M, if I look closely, it looks like they tinted the taillights just a tiny bit, by a couple percent. When I think about tinted taillights, I think about the 18-year-old tinting his Honda Civic taillight, trying to make it look more menacing, but it never really helps the overall design of the car. And I think that's the case with the X5M as well. I preferred having be a clear red in the taillights instead of having this tint over it to darken the whole taillight like we have on the new X5M. So now let's look at the interiors of these two cars. We have the normal X5 at the top, and we have the X5M at the bottom. Yes, we do have this typical by now standard for BMW big TV on the dash that doesn't feel at all integrated. It doesn't follow this line, it doesn't follow this line, it just cuts into all of these lines that sits behind it. I don't think this is a great integration of a gauge cluster or an infotainment system, but that's how BMW do things these days. Other than that, I like what we have going on around the big display, because these lines feel like they have a good symmetry to them. And also this piece, same thing in the X5M, it faces the driver, and that's what you want in a BMW. It's been like that in BMWs for as long as I can remember. The 70s BMW 3 Series and 5 Series of the 80s, they all had this part facing the driver, but just a tiny angle. And I think that emphasizes that this is a car that is designed around the driver. Now, what I really love about the new X5M, which I talked about in the beginning, the little detail in the interior, is the steering wheel, because this looks like a throwback modernization of the E39 M5 steering wheel. It is one of the best sedans ever made. I love that car, I love everything about it, the exterior, the interior, and this feels like it is a lot simpler in its shape and a lot more classic by having this centerpiece round. You can find this steering wheel in other competition models as well, but I think it suits the X5 to have this pretty dialed down design in the X5M, and it also brings in some of the history of BMW, which I love, and having its 3 spokes just emphasizes the sportiness of this car as well. So what am I gonna do in this redesign? So you see these pieces, I'm gonna focus on these, the lower part, the lower half of this front end. So going from this point down, this is what I want to work on. I want to have this line be horizontal with the graphics that go here. So I'm going to lower these graphics to be in line with the center graphics of the lower part of the rear end. I'm also going to cover up this with some mesh, some old traditional BMW M looking mesh to cover up everything that goes on here. It feels like something is missing to be covering all the the components that we see clearly here. I think they did a good job with the grill covering that up with these ribs, but the lower part definitely needs some work. So we're gonna lower this. It's gonna create a big mass here of surfacing where nothing goes on. So I want to have a chamfer that sits underneath the headlights and kind of follows the lines, something like this. And with that said, let's jump into this redesign. Let's see how this is going to turn out.